I almost turned the truck around. My hand was already on the wheel. Foot light on the brake. Heart doing that slow, stubborn thing it does when it knows you're about to run. I told myself I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Not my friends. Not a stranger. Not fate. Been the kind of man people set up on dates. I like my space. Most Sundays, you'll find me behind my cabin outside Pine Hollow. With me? Truth is, quiet never asked me to be anyone else. That's why the text from Evan hit wrong. Blind date, Sunday. 3 p.m. Clearwater coffee by the lake. I knew better. My friends treat my single life like a problem they need to solve. Last time, it ended with speed dating and a woman who spoke about her iguana like it was a toddler. Evan laughed for weeks. You'll thank us later. I stared at my phone and sighed. Fine, asterisk, I texted back. But if this goes bad, you're buying drinks for a month. Sunday came too fast. I was halfway through sanding a cedar chair when I checked the time. Sawdust clung to my arms. The air was sharp with wood glue and sap. Lifted his head from the floor like he already knew I was about to make a mistake. Claimed truck trouble. No one would have doubted it. But pride has a way of pushing you forward when sense says stop. I washed up, pulled on clean jeans, a flannel, and my worn work boots. Trying too hard is how you lose. Clearwater coffee sat right by the lake. All timber beams and wide windows. No Evan, just normal life unfolding without me. I ordered black coffee and took a seat by the window. 3 o'clock came. Then 3:10, at 3:15, I stood up, ready to leave. That's when the door chimed. I looked up, expecting laughter. Instead, I saw her, and the room went still. She stepped inside like she wasn't bracing for anything, like she hadn't rehearsed an escape or scanned the room for exits. Her presence didn't announce itself, but it changed the air all the same. Conversations kept going. Ups clinked. Still, something settled quiet in my chest the moment I saw her. She was close to my age, late 30s, maybe early 40s. Brown hair pulled into a loose knot, a few soft strands brushing her neck. She wore a long, faded blue dress that moved gently when she walked, and a light cardigan that looked like it had been worn on cool mornings before. Nothing sharp. Nothing loud. Just steady. She looked around the cafe once. Then her eyes landed on me. They didn't slide away. She walked straight toward my table. My first thought was that she had the wrong guy. My second was that I hoped she wouldn't figure that out too quickly. She stopped in front of me, smiling, not practiced, not careful, just warm, like it came naturally. "Daniel," she said. My heart kicked hard. "Yeah," I answered, standing. Too fast, my knee hit the table. Coffee sloshed near the rim. "That's me. Sorry, I don't usually stand up like that." She laughed, soft and genuine, like she wasn't judging the moment at all. "I'm Mara," she said, offering. Her fingers were warm when I took them. The touch was brief, polite. Still, I felt it long after she sat down across from me, like this was exactly where she meant to be. I glanced past her shoulder, half expecting Evan to pop out from behind a plant with his phone raised. No one did. Mara leaned back in her chair, studying me with calm curiosity. "I'm guessing we're victims of the same plan," she said. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "That sounds about right. Evan thinks he's funny." My friend Rachel said I'd thank her later. Mara replied, amusement tugging at her smile. She told me to meet a man named Daniel and stop hiding. I shook my head, disbelief. Mixing with something else, something lighter. "So you thought this was a prank too?" "Absolutely," she said. "But I figured the worst case is I waste an hour. Best case, I get coffee and a decent story." I found myself staring, not in a way that felt rude. in a way that felt like my mind was trying to catch up to my chest. She wasn't who I expected, not that I knew what I expected. She felt real, comfortable, like quiet without loneliness. Mara tilted her head, catching my look. Not what you imagined. I rubbed the back of my neck. Not even close. I was prepared for reptiles. Her laugh was easy, the kind you want to hear again. No reptiles, she promised. Just coffee and questionable decisions. Outside, the lake shimmered under the afternoon sun. Inside, the smell of cinnamon lingered. And across from me, a stranger sat like she wanted to be there. I sat back down, suddenly certain of one thing. I wasn't leaving yet. Mara folded her hands on the table and leaned in just enough to feel personal. "So," she said, "how did you get talked into this?" I surprised myself by answering honestly. Not the cleaned-up version, the real one. I told her my friends. Worried about me like quiet was a symptom. Like my cabin outside Pine Hollow was a warning sign instead of a choice. I told her they kept throwing dates at me, hoping one would stick. I told her I was tired of apps and rehearsed answers and pretending. I cared where someone wanted to travel next. She listened without interrupting. No nodding too fast, no waiting to speak. When I finished, she took a slow sip of her coffee, eyes still on mine. "That sounds exhausting," she said. "No wonder you live with a dog." I laughed, short and surprised. "Boone's better company than most people." "I believe that," she said, and it didn't sound like teasing. Sounded like understanding. She told me about Rachel. She'd been nudging her to date again for months. Mara said she'd been married once. It ended quietly. No shouting, no drama. Just two people who stopped choosing each other. She moved back near Pine Hollow to help her mom, not because she was sick, but because the house got too quiet. Because some evenings feel heavier when no one's there to notice. She didn't ask for sympathy. She didn't need it. That alone made me respect her. Time shifted after that. The cafe filled up around us. A barista called names. A spoon clattered. Laughter drifted from the counter. Still, Mara and I stayed in our own pocket of air. I told her about my work freelance, carpentry, decks, and repairs. Furniture when I got lucky. I told her about the small wooden animals I carve when my head gets loud. Things I can hold and finish. "You make things that last," she said. "It's just wood," I answered. Though my voice softened, she shook her head. "It's you taking something rough and making it solid." I looked out the window, pretending. The lake needed my attention because my chest felt warmer than I expected. When she asked about Boone, I showed her a picture of him on my porch, stick in his mouth, guarding the whole hillside. She laughed and covered her mouth. "He looks like he judges strangers." "He does," I said, "but he's got a good heart." "Like dogs that have been through things," she said quietly. The words sat between us. Heavy in a way neither of us rushed to explain. Then she asked the question that caught me off guard. "Why did you really come?" She said. "You could've." Bailed. I met her eyes and didn't dodge. "Because I didn't want to be the guy who always runs," I said. "And because I was curious about what?" I swallowed. "About whether my life could be different." She didn't smile right away. She just nodded, slow and sure. "That's a good reason," she said. And for the first time in a long while, I believed it might be. We talked until the light outside the window shifted. The lake turned gold, then pale, like the day was easing into something softer. I felt that familiar urge rise in me, the one that tells me to end things before they grow roots. Leave while it's still safe. Before someone can walk away first, Mara checked her watch and let out a small laugh. "We've been here a while." "Yeah," I said, my voice rougher than I meant. "I didn't mean to keep you." "You didn't," she replied. I stayed. That sentence landed heavier than it should have. Simple, honest. The barista started wiping down tables. The crowd thinned. The lights dimmed just enough to signal closing. Mara stood and slipped her bag over her shoulder. Our friends are going to want a full report. I stood too, rubbing the back of my neck. They'll probably think they've fixed my entire life. She smiled, teasing, but thoughtful. Did they? I opened my mouth, then closed it. The answer wasn't clean. We walked out together into cooler air, the scent of lake water mixing with pine. The sky was pale blue, streaked with orange near the horizon. Mara stopped beside her car, beat-up Subaru that looked like it had lived a real life. It didn't match her dress, and somehow that made me like her more. She turned to me, eyes steady. "Thanks for not bolting when I walked in," she said. I swallowed. "Thanks for walking in." For a moment, it felt like she might step closer. Instead, she nodded, like she was saving something for later. "I had a good time, Daniel." "Me too," I said. I meant it. She opened her door, then looked back. "If your friends ask, tell them it wasn't a joke. Tell them it was coffee." Then she drove off, taillights fading along the road that curved around the lake. I stood there longer than I needed to, hands in my pockets, feeling the chill on my face. That's when I realized my phone was still in my hand. I didn't have her number, for the first time in years. I cared enough to feel foolish about it. Boone met me at the cabin door like he'd been waiting for a verdict. He jumped up, paws on my chest, then paced in circles like he could smell something different on me. I sat on the couch, boots still on, staring at the wall, replaying Mara's laugh, her voice. The way she said, "I stayed." My phone buzzed. Evan. So? Lone wolf. How bad was it? Asterisk. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then I typed the only thing that felt true. It wasn't a joke. Evan replied almost instantly. That's not an answer. Details? I didn't respond. I didn't have details. Just the feeling that something had started. And the fear that if I wasn't careful, I'd ruin it before it ever had a chance to become real. Monday and Tuesday stretched longer than they should have. I tried to pretend the date hadn't gotten under my skin. I sanded wood, threw sticks. For Boone, told myself it was just one good conversation. Then my phone buzzed while I was wiping sawdust off a table. Unknown number, asterisk, thanks for the unexpected coffee. If you want to hear another strange animal story, I'm free Thursday. Asterisk, my chest flipped. Boone lifted his head like he felt it too. I laughed out loud. I typed back with unsteady hands. Asterisk only, if there are no reptiles. Thursday works. Asterisk, her reply. Came fast, named the place. And just like that, I knew this wasn't over. Thursday arrived quicker than it should have. I spent the day pretending I wasn't nervous. I repaired a fence outside town, drove nails like my focus depended on it, checked the time more than a man should. By late afternoon, I was already home, showered, pulling on a clean flannel like it mattered. Boone sat by the door with his leash in his mouth, tail wagging like he knew this wasn't just another walk. "Don't embarrass me," I told him. He sneezed, which felt like an answer. The lakefront trail was quiet at 6. Pines lined the path. The water reflected the fading light, smooth and steady. A few people passed with dogs. A couple walked hand in hand like nowhere else mattered. I spotted Mara sitting on a bench, a thermos resting between her hands. Her hair was down this time, curling past her shoulders. She wore a soft gray sweater and jeans. No dress, no cardigan, just her. Comfortable, real. When she looked up and saw me, her smile landed warm and sure. Boone didn't wait for permission. He tugged the leash and bounded toward her like he'd found an old friend. Mara laughed and crouched, letting him sniff her hands before scratching behind his ears. Boone melted completely. "Well," she said, smiling, "you weren't exaggerating." "He takes after me," I said, trying to sound casual. She raised an eyebrow. "We'll see." We started walking, Boone trotting proudly between us. The trail crunched under our shoes. The air smelled like pine and water. At first, we kept it light. She told me about her mom complaining about the neighbors. I told her Boone once stole an entire sandwich off my counter without leaving evidence. "You live with a thief," she said. "He's cute," I answered. "He gets a pass." She smiled like she was about to say something, then let it go. That was the thing about Mara. She didn't rush silence. She let moments breathe. We stopped near the water where the trail opened wide. The lake glittered with the last of the sun. Mara held out her thermos. "Peppermint," she said. "It helps when the air gets sharp." I took a sip, surprised by the warmth. "Thanks." "I wanted to," she said. Simple. As we walked on, the conversation shifted, not heavy, just real. I told her about my cabin, how quiet doesn't ask questions, how trees don't need explanations. She listened, eyes on the lake. "I get that," she said. Then she spoke again, softer. "After my divorce, I thought being alone would feel peaceful. Sometimes it is. Other times it feels like disappearing." I stopped walking. "You're not disappearing," I said. "Not to me." She looked at me then, something fragile passing behind her eyes. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just another evening. It was the start of something neither of us was ready to name. We didn't rush after that. We didn't need to. The days that followed settled into something steady, something that didn't ask to be explained. We met when it felt right. Dinner at my cabin one night, steaks on the grill, and a bottle of red. Why Mara brought like it was no big thing. I apologized for the mismatched plates. She laughed and said they had character. Boone sat at her feet like he'd appointed himself her guard. She told me my place felt like a home another evening. We went into town and painted small canvases at a quiet art cafe. Mine looked like a lopsided mountain. Hers looked like the lake at sunset. She teased me, I teased her back. And for once, I didn't feel like I was performing. I felt present. She started using my full name when she was amused with me. "Daniel," she'd say, shaking her head like she couldn't quite believe I was real. I noticed how much I wanted to hear it. Then the grocery store happened. It was a Saturday afternoon. We stood in the bread aisle, debating sourdough versus rye. Mara was smiling, really smiling, like the weight she carried had lifted for a second. Then her smile faded. Her body went still. Her hand tightened on my arm. I followed her gaze. A man stood near the end of the aisle. Early 40s, a clean haircut, expensive jacket. He held hands with a younger woman who laughed too loudly, unaware of the shift in the air. The man looked up. His eyes locked on Mara. His smile died. "Mara," he said, clipped. She lifted her chin. "Ethan, I didn't need an explanation." Her ex-husband, his eyes flicked to me, then to her hand still wrapped around my arm. A slow smirk tugged at his mouth. "So," he said, "this is your new phase." The word scraped, like she was temporary. Like I was a joke. "This is Daniel," Mara said, calm but sharp. "And he makes me feel like I matter." My chest tightened hard at that. Ethan's smirk wobbled. He laughed like he didn't want to look affected. Didn't think. "You'd go for the rugged type," he said, glancing at my flannel. I stepped forward, not threatening, just there. Mara squeezed my arm once, telling me she could handle this, but she was glad I was standing beside her. Ethan turned away like he wanted the last word without earning it. "Hope it works out." Mara didn't watch him leave. She looked at me. Instead, steady on the surface. shaking underneath. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded, though it wasn't convincing. "Let's go." We left with half the groceries and all of the tension. The drive back to my cabin was quiet. Her hands stayed, folded in her lap, fingers tight. When we pulled in, she didn't get out right away. "He used to make me feel small," she said finally. "He doesn't get to anymore," I answered. She swallowed. "Sometimes it still feels like he does." I reached for her hand. "Not here." I said, "Not with me." She squeezed back hard, and I knew this was deeper than either of us had planned. That night, after Mara went home, the wind picked up around my cabin. It rattled the trees and pressed against the windows like a warning I couldn't quite name. Boone lay at my feet while I sat on the couch, staring at nothing, replaying the look on Mara's face in that grocery store, steady on the outside, shaken underneath. My phone buzzed. Mind if I come over tomorrow night? I don't want to be alone. My heart kicked hard. I didn't wait a second. "Come over," I typed. Doors. Open. The next day dragged. By evening, the sky turned dark and a cold rain settled in, tapping the roof in a steady rhythm. Boone paced by the door, ears lifting at every sound. Then I heard tires on gravel. I opened the door before she knocked. Mara stood there with her, umbrella dripping, cheeks pink from the cold, hair damp at the ends. She looked tired but relieved, like she'd been holding herself together all day. "You're not dropping in," I said, stepping aside. "You're coming in." She exhaled, like she'd been waiting to hear that. Inside, the cabin felt warmer with her there. I made peppermint tea. We sat on the couch with a blanket over our legs while rain tapped the windows. Boone curled at her feet, loyal as ever. For a while, we didn't talk. The good kind of quiet. Then she spoke. "It's not just seeing Ethan," she said. "It's remembering how I made myself smaller to keep the peace. How I convinced myself quiet was happiness." She looked at me. "Then you happened." My throat tightened. "I don't want to do life alone anymore," she whispered. "That scares me." I turned toward her, slow, careful. "What scares you more?" I asked. "Wanting it or losing it?" "Both." I touched her cheek. "You're not a burden." I said, "You make my life feel full." She searched my face like she was deciding whether she was allowed to believe me. Then she leaned in. The kiss was warm and steady, tasting faintly of peppermint. Not rushed, not afraid. She stayed that night, not in a reckless way, in the way that matters. She fell asleep on my shoulder while the rain faded. I didn't move. Morning came clean and cold. Sunlight broke through the trees. We made eggs and toast. She stood in my kitchen in her socks, humming softly. When she left, she didn't rush. She kissed me once on the porch, sure and real. A minute later, my phone buzzed. "Evan, so. Was it a joke?" I looked around my cabin, her mug in the sink, her cardigan by the door. Boone watching the road. "No," I typed. It was the best thing you ever did for me. And for the first time in my life, quiet didn't feel like hiding anymore.